Hey guys, tonight we take a candlelit detour into the weird, wild world of medieval fun. And trust me, you might want to keep one eye open. Imagine the smell of wet straw, roasted meat, sweat, and something feral. You're pressed against a splintery wooden railing, feet caked in mud, the crowd around you drunk on cheap ale and bloodlust. Then it happens. The bear appears. A massive, grunting brown bear, thick chained to a central post, fur matted and eyes weary. Around the arena, the barking begins, not from the crowd, but from the dogs. Muscular, snarling mastiffs, bred for this one horrifying purpose: bear baiting. You can't look away. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're watching from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The crowd roars, the bear roars louder, the dogs are released, four at once. They dash forward, leap, snap. The bear swings with terrifying strength, knocking one midair like a rag doll. The crowd loves it. Some are placing bets. A few nobles laugh from behind velvet-draped seats, sipping spiced wine. And you? You're somewhere between awe and horror. This, disturbingly enough, is entertainment. Bear baiting wasn't just a one-off novelty. It was a staple in towns across Europe for centuries. In England, royal families even kept personal bear baiting arenas. Queen Elizabeth I was reportedly a fan. She even shut down theaters occasionally so people could attend the games instead. Historians still argue whether this was rooted in some subconscious human urge for control over nature, or just sheer boredom, mixed with too much mead. But there's a curious twist. The bears were often reused. They'd be given names: Ned, Grizzle, even Old Monarch, and people would recognize them fight after fight. It wasn't uncommon for a bear to survive dozens of battles. Some even became local celebrities. Of course, celebrity here means they were slightly less mauled than others. And if you're wondering about the dogs, let's just say they were not expected to survive long enough to gain fans. You're shoved forward slightly. Someone in the crowd just spilled their drink on your back, and no one apologizes. The air smells like blood and roasted turnips. A little boy next to you is waving a stick, pretending he's one of the dogs. His mother, proudly, tells him he'll be in the ring himself someday. You try to step back, but the crowd has closed in. Your boots are soaked now, and someone just shouted a bet over your shoulder. 5 pence says the bear takes two dogs down before noon. The strange part? You almost want to stay and see how it ends. Entertainment wasn't sanitized in the medieval world. It wasn't something you sat politely through, nodding thoughtfully. It was raw, chaotic, and usually dangerous. No safety rails, no disclaimers, just living creatures and a crowd hungry for chaos. And for the performers, yes, the bear counts as one. This was just another Tuesday. Bear baiting arenas sometimes shared space with brothels, taverns, or outdoor markets. You could shop for onions, get a tooth pulled, watch a bear fight, and then stumble home all before sunset. A real medieval day out. And not all baiting was bears. Bulls, apes, and even lions were sometimes thrown into the mix. There's one bizarre account of a costumed man dressed as a satyr being chased around by hounds for sport. He survived, barely. And yes, he did it again the following month for double pay. One fringe tale, possibly apocryphal, tells of a noble who tried baiting a camel once, just to see how it would fight. It didn't go well. Camels don't play fair, apparently. And still, despite the violence, people came for the energy, the shouting, the smell of victory or failure in the air. In some towns, you'd be considered odd if you didn't attend. You're beginning to feel a bit woozy now. Could be the heat, could be the blood, could be the giant man next to you yelling directly into your ear. You inch away, trying not to look the bear in the eye. It seems to glance your way. Maybe a coincidence, maybe not. Its fur glistens with sweat and something darker. You're not sure you like being this close anymore, yet part of you understands why people kept coming back. Because in a time when survival itself was a daily drama, perhaps the only way to escape the grind was to watch something worse struggle to survive instead. And the worst part? Tomorrow's show features two bears. You're still wiping bear sweat, or was it someone else's beer, off your tunic when the next event is announced, a public execution. And oddly enough, the crowd cheers even louder. This one's a big deal. A local thief, caught red-handed stealing bread during Lent, and now he's going to pay the price, but not in a dingy dungeon or behind closed doors. No, this is a community event, and you're invited. You walk with the crowd. Everyone's chattering, gossiping, even laughing. It's like heading to a music festival. If music festivals had gallows instead of stages. Vendors line the cobbled path selling roasted chestnuts, honey cakes, hot wine. Children tug their parents toward the best spots. A guy with a lute strums a lively tune. It's disturbingly festive. You finally reach the town square, and yep, people are already laying out picnic blankets. That's right, cushions, baskets, the works. One family has even brought a roasted goose. You feel a little underprepared with your sad wedge of cheese. Then you see him, the condemned, dirty, barefoot, arms bound behind his back. A few of the more pious townsfolk cross themselves. Others shout insults. A group of young women near you starts arguing about whether he's too handsome to hang. You don't join in, but you do notice his jawline. The executioner arrives, tall, hooded, holding an axe that's clearly seen some use. You've heard stories about these men, half feared, half celebrity. Kids pretend to be him during games. He walks slowly, milking the moment. Historians still argue whether executioners were social outcasts or respected civic workers. Some records show they were even paid extra to dispose of corpses or clean latrines. Others suggest they were invited to noble feasts after a clean beheading. Talk about a weird work perk. The crowd hushes. The town priest steps forward, gives a short sermon. It's mostly about sin, justice, and how bread thieves are just one step away from devil worship. Someone behind you mutters about how they once stole a turnip and lived to tell the tale. You edge away. The condemned man says nothing. Maybe he's brave. Maybe he's resigned. Maybe he's already planning to haunt everyone present. And then, it happens. The executioner raises the axe. The crowd leans forward in perfect silence. You can hear someone munching a pear behind you. Then one clean swing. Well, almost clean. It takes 2 tries. You wince, the children cheer, the band strikes up again. You think you're going to be sick, but nobody else seems bothered. This is what people do. These executions were planned in advance, timed for market days when crowds would be biggest. They were often advertised like traveling carnivals. Come one, come all, see justice served. There's even a fringe record of a baker giving away free fruit loaves in the shape of tiny nooses during one particularly hyped hanging. You sit down finally, overwhelmed. Someone offers you a goblet of cider. It's surprisingly good. You look around. People are chatting, flirting, even napping. One woman knits calmly as blood seeps into the nearby straw. You wonder if this is some kind of collective madness or just desensitization. Because for the average medieval peasant, life is short, brutal, and relentlessly uncertain. The only thing more gripping than surviving your day is watching someone else's end. Sometimes, there were even multiple executions back to back. Thieves, heretics, political traitors. One notable event in Paris featured over 80 criminals hanged in a single day. That's not justice. That's a marathon. And believe it or not, execution sites could double as romantic hangouts. Young couples sneaking glances, holding hands, whispering between each other. Maybe there's something about staring at death that makes life feel more precious. Or maybe it's just an awkward first date idea gone wrong. You glance at the now lifeless body. Already, some townsfolk are moving closer. Not out of malice, but curiosity. It's said that a drop of blood from the freshly dead could cure warts, ease childbirth, or improve fertility. A few folks even dip cloth into it for later use. You gag a little. A man near you says he saw someone once collect a tooth as a lucky charm. You slowly inch away. By the time the sun hits its highest point, the square is nearly empty. People pack up their leftovers, wipe their mouths, and stroll off to continue their errands. Someone's already scrubbing the platform with sand. It's like it never happened. Except for the memory now lodged in your mind forever. You wander off, dazed. The lute player is still strumming. A woman skips by with a smile. And you? You've just had your first taste of medieval justice as afternoon entertainment. Honestly, you kind of miss the bear. You're still trying to shake the image of a man's head rolling across a wooden stage when a sudden, high-pitched trumpet interrupts your thoughts. You turn to see a small wooden platform being rolled into the center of the village green. It's decorated with ribbons, painted moons, and, wait, sausages? The crowd gathers once more. A young boy runs past you, laughing, and yells, "It's the farting man! He's back!" You blink. The what? Welcome to one of the most absurd and oddly beloved entertainments of the medieval era. Flatulence competitions. Yes, fart shows. You didn't mishear that. A rotund man climbs up onto the stage. He bows dramatically and wiggles his rear end at the audience like it's a royal decree. Someone tosses him a coin. A pair of drummers starts to beat a rhythm, and the man leans in, concentrating. Then, puffed, a perfectly timed toot in sync with the drum beat. The crowd erupts in applause. You stare in disbelief. Turns out, farting, when done skillfully, was seen as an art. There were even semi-professional performers who toured towns and castles showing off their musical talents. The most famous of these was a 12th century jester named Roland the Farter. Historical records show he was granted a manor in Suffolk in exchange for performing one jump, one whistle, and one fart for the king every Christmas. Historians still argue whether Roland's gift was literal or metaphorical. Was he passing gas or just making a rude noise with his mouth? Frankly, you kind of hope it was the latter. But watching the current performer, there's no room for doubt. This is real. He begins his routine in earnest. One fart sounds like a trumpet, another like a duck in distress. Then he somehow mimics a door creaking open. The audience goes wild. A woman near you wipes away tears of laughter. An older man chuckles. Reminds me of the time I drank too much plum ale. To your horror and slight amusement, the performer invites volunteers from the audience. A few brave or drunk souls shuffle forward. One man tries, fails, and earns only polite pity claps. Another surprises everyone with a long, spiraling squeaker that earns him a standing ovation and 2 cabbages. You're offered a chance to participate. You politely decline. As you edge away, someone explains that these contests were often part of larger festivals or carnivals, where the rules of society were temporarily inverted. On days like this, laughter, absurdity, and bodily noises reigned supreme. Priests and peasants alike stood side by side, roaring with laughter at something that, under normal circumstances, would be considered deeply improper. It's not just flatulence either. Bodily humor was everywhere. Medieval jesters frequently used burps, belches, and yes, poop jokes in their routines. Some even carried pouches filled with pig bladders or whoopee cushion-like inflatables to enhance the performance. One fringe tale speaks of a monk who accidentally discovered he had a talent for pitch-perfect passing gas during choir practice. Instead of being punished, he was later invited to perform at a noble wedding. He apparently ended his performance with a solemn bow and the line, "May your love be long, and your digestion smooth." You sit down on a bale of hay, equal parts disturbed and delighted. There's a freedom here, an unapologetic joy in the ridiculous. Life is grim, sure, but for a few minutes, everyone forgets the plagues, the taxes, the endless toil. They laugh until their stomachs hurt. Ironically appropriate given the subject matter. The farting man finishes his act with a curtsy. A child hands him a wildflower. He sticks it behind his ear and prances off stage like a knight who's just won a duel. People clap. Some toss coins. Others chant his name like he's a folk hero. And in a way, he is. Because in a world full of brutal spectacle, grim justice, and hard labor, sometimes the greatest act of rebellion is letting loose and laughing about it. You're still chuckling softly, whether from the fumes or the absurdity, you're not sure, when you're led into a banquet hall that looks like something from a fever dream. Giant roast boars sit on silver platters. Tables groan under piles of glazed pears, marzipan sculptures, and what appears to be an entire swan, feathers reattached post-roast. But that's not the strange part. No, the strange part is what's happening between the courses. A man dressed in yellow and red hops onto the table, narrowly missing a gravy boat. His cap jingles. He sticks out his tongue and balances a spoon on his nose. Then he drops his pants to reveal another set of pants, this time embroidered with smiling faces. The nobles roar with laughter. Welcome to feast entertainment, where dinner wasn't complete without jesters, dwarfs, sword swallowers, and the occasional fire breather who got a little too close to the drapes. You take a seat carefully and sip something sweet from a pewter goblet. It's hard to focus on your food when a man 3 seats down is trying to juggle a goose egg, a pear, and what may be a human toe bone. Across the room, a dwarf, dressed as a bishop, is singing an off-key ballad about flatulence in Latin. It's a callback to the last event. You smile. These people love a theme. The jester flips onto the table and begins mimicking the guests. He squawks like the local baron's nasal voice, then imitates a noblewoman fanning herself dramatically. The crowd howls. You're terrified he'll impersonate you next. He does, and nails your awkward cheese-munching posture perfectly. You're both impressed and offended. Historians still argue whether jesters were genuinely protected truth-tellers or just well-paid court clowns. Some had immense freedom, allowed to mock even the king, as long as they made him laugh. Others lived dangerously close to being executed for a poorly timed joke. Tonight, the jester's winning. Then come the sideshows. A man swallows a sword so long it touches his belt buckle. A fire eater douses a torch in ale, lights it anyway, and breathes out a dragon's tongue that makes the crowd gasp. You instinctively check for an escape route. In one dark corner, a man sits silently with a trained monkey. Every time someone makes eye contact, the monkey hurls a bit of bread at them. It's bizarre. It's hysterical. It's kind of brilliant. Feast entertainers often included natural fools, a medieval term for those with developmental differences who were seen as divinely touched and gifted in comedy. Others were artificial fools, professionals trained in music, mimicry, and mockery. Dwarfs, considered lucky by superstition, were frequently employed in noble courts. The line between reverence and ridicule was always blurry. But it wasn't all jokes. Some performances veered dark. A favorite trick? Serving a fake boiled baby made of meat and flour to horrify then delight guests when they discovered the joke. Another? A severed animal head placed under a silver dome, which sang thanks to a hidden minstrel below the table. One fringe account tells of a nobleman who trained a flock of pigeons to fly out of a pie and perform aerial formations above the table. It worked until one relieved itself in the queen's goblet. You're on your third goblet of honeyed wine now, and the room's spinning slightly. But even in your tipsy state, you can't help but admire the chaos, coordination at play. Between courses, between politics, between marriages arranged at this very table, there's this wild, reckless joy. Feasts lasted hours, sometimes days, and the longer they stretched, the stranger the acts got. One record describes a jester who performed entirely in burps after losing his voice. Another recounts a woman who trained fleas to dance on a tiny stage under a magnifying glass. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. Suddenly, the lights dim. Well, the torches flicker, and everyone quiets. A final act. A man in a painted mask walks silently across the table, carrying a goose egg. He sets it down. It hatches. You blink. Is this real? The jester whispers, "It's a trick, of course," and winks at you. You're not sure what's more surprising, that you're being addressed directly or that you're still awake after everything. But tonight's not over. The next course is served, a pie with live frogs that leap out when cut. Your appetite fades, but your curiosity burns brighter than ever. You're beginning to understand something important. Medieval people didn't just endure life, they distracted themselves from it with relentless, absurd, often dangerous pageantry. They ate like royalty, laughed like maniacs, and risked indigestion and singed eyebrows all in one evening. And as the final toast is raised and the fire eater takes one last breath, you realize that was just dinner. You stumble out of the feast hall, full of questionable pie and residual smoke from the fire eater's finale. The air outside is brisk, the sky turning that deep medieval purple that promises nothing but damp cloaks and cold feet. You think it's over. Surely, nothing else could top a monkey with a throwing arm and a live frog pie. But as you're drawn toward the village green once more, you hear drums. Not polite, feast-time drums. These are heavy, tribal, pulsing, like a heartbeat rising in anticipation. A wooden fence surrounds a makeshift arena, the ground churned into thick mud. You squint through the torchlight. Dozens of peasants stand in rough lines, armed with sacks of flour, pig's bladders, and what appears to be an old boot tied to a stick. You've arrived just in time for a mock battle. Not a real battle, no armor or polished swords here. This is chaos dressed as sport, peasant tournaments, sometimes known as pod arm or local boon fights. These were community events, part game, part venting session, part social ladder shaker. Think of them as the medieval version of an all-male rugby match meets Black Friday sale at a butcher's. You squeeze through the crowd and nearly slip into the mud. A child hands you a rock-hard bread roll and says, "For throwing, not eating." You don't ask questions. The announcer, a man missing both front teeth and one boot, calls out the teams. The North Winders versus the South Swillers. The crowd erupts. You cheer, having no idea what side you're on. Then the match begins. It's impossible to describe cleanly, but you try. Imagine two walls of peasants slamming into each other, flailing with sacks, swinging sticks padded with straw, and shouting what sounds like animal calls. Someone's already missing a shoe. Someone else is chasing a runaway pig. The prize, apparently for the winning team. A third participant simply sits in the mud and sings loudly about fish. There's no clear objective, no scorekeeper. The only rules, no killing. Maybe. One man wears a full suit of dented armor made of old pots. Another swings what looks like a broom handle with feathers taped to the end. The crowd throws turnips. You dodge one, barely. You laugh in shock. Then someone hands you a sausage on a stick and says, "Welcome to the war." Mock battles weren't just peasant madness. Even nobles participated in elaborate, choreographed jousts for show. But in the villages, this was different. It was raw, unpredictable, and oddly communal. Historians still argue whether these events were spontaneous or semi-organized by local leaders. Some think they were a way to diffuse tension. Others believe they were deliberate class catharsis, giving peasants a controlled space to hit something that wasn't their boss. You watch as someone uses a goat's skull as a helmet and then immediately regrets it. Then the real chaos begins. The pig is released, squealing, covered in oil for difficulty. It runs across the field. Both teams stop what they're doing and charge. The pig veers left. A man dives, Another slips in mud. You swear someone just threw a shoe on purpose. The pig is fast, too fast. Eventually, someone grabs its tail. They're dragged several feet before face planting. A cheer goes up. The pig escapes again. The crowd is in hysterics. This goes on for 30 minutes. Finally, the Northwinders manage to corner the pig behind a stack of hay bales and hoist it into the air like a trophy. The crowd goes wild. Someone fires off a tiny hand cannon in celebration. You can't feel your ears. Then the losers demand a rematch, this time with blindfolds. You politely step backward, feigning urgent goose herding duties. Events like these weren't just about fun. They were expressions of community identity, raw ritual, and sometimes just a way to get away with punching your neighbor in the face legally. Prizes ranged from livestock to wheelbarrows of cabbage to, on one memorable occasion, a tax exemption for one full day. A fringe account from rural Germany tells of a village that once had an annual mud duel where rivals literally wrestled in knee-deep sludge over romantic grievances. The winner got a token from the woman in question. The loser got very, very wet, and still, the appeal remains. You, standing at the edge of the madness, realize that despite the bruises and broken carts, everyone seems genuinely happy. This isn't war. It's messy, democratic release, an escape from obedience, a break from submission, a moment to be wild and free, with just enough bruises to brag about later. You're offered the pig to carry home. You decline, citing a sudden allergy. The night winds down. Mud-covered warriors stumble toward alehouses, still laughing, still proud. Someone is crowned most creative weapon, having taped 3 spoons to a stick and called it the ladle of doom. You wipe flecks of turnip off your sleeve and whisper to yourself, "That was the most fun I never want to have again." And just as you think it's time to retire for the night, distant music floats through the trees. You follow the sound, still sticky, still wide-eyed, because the next strange delight is already calling you. You follow the music like a sleepwalker. It's not melodic exactly, more like the fevered jingling of bells sewn into tattered skirts, the dull thump of barefoot dancers on wooden boards, and the high-pitched wail of a flute that may or may not be in tune. It's coming from the church square. At first, it looks like a festival. Torches sway in the dark. A circle has formed, and in its center, dozens of people are moving, no, writhing, as if caught between a dance and a seizure. Their arms fling wide, their feet pound the earth, their mouths hang open in eerie, silent gasps. No music drives them, yet they twist and spin like they've been possessed by something far older and stranger than rhythm. Welcome to the dancing plague. You inch closer, heart thudding. No one seems alarmed. In fact, the crowd looks entranced. They murmur prayers, toss coins into the center, and occasionally join in. You spot a few familiar faces from the pig wrestling melee just hours ago. They're now spinning wildly, sweat-slicked and glassy-eyed, as if they've been dancing all day. Because they probably have. These outbreaks, part spiritual event, part medical mystery, cropped up across medieval Europe. The most infamous occurred in 1518 in Strasbourg, where dozens danced uncontrollably for days. Some collapsed, some died. No one fully understood why. Historians still argue whether it was mass hysteria, moldy rye, a form of ecstatic worship, or an early psychological illness. What's agreed on is that it was very real. Clerics were called in, physicians were baffled, musicians were hired to play along. Because yes, at one point, the townspeople thought the best way to stop the dancing was to give it a beat. You blink, and someone grabs your hand. Suddenly, you're pulled into the circle. The energy hits you like a wave, hot, breathless, full of static. Around you, bodies lurch and collide, arms flailing like branches in a storm. A woman shrieks, not in fear, but in what sounds like joy or release. A child spins in tight circles, his eyes closed, mouth whispering something you can't hear. You move, mostly to avoid being trampled, but soon you're swept up in it too. You leap, sway, stumble, laugh. And for a terrifying moment, you get it. Maybe it's the mead from dinner. Maybe it's the residual adrenaline from the pig chase. Or maybe, just maybe, this was what people did when life was too overwhelming, when war, famine, plague, and fear closed in. They danced. They danced to forget. They danced to feel alive. They danced because not dancing would mean acknowledging everything else. A friar wades into the circle with a crucifix, chanting Latin over the dancers. Some stop. Others ignore him. One man kisses the cross, then immediately resumes hopping like a frog. The friar sighs and trudges off. You start to tire. Your legs burn. Your head spins. You try to stop, but you can't. Not yet. The energy around you is magnetic, irrational, addictive. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the music ceases. Not the flute. It was never real, but the internal rhythm that had everyone moving. One by one, the dancers stagger out of the circle, dripping with sweat. Some cry, some laugh. One woman falls to her knees and kisses the dirt. A man shouts, "I saw St. Vitus himself," before fainting face first into a cabbage. You sit down hard on the cold stone steps of the chapel. Your heartbeat hammers like a blacksmith's anvil. Your vision wobbles, but deep inside, you feel lighter, emptier, like you've burned off something you didn't even know you were carrying. A baker sits beside you, face smeared with soot, and offers you a sticky bun. You take it without question. Theories about these outbreaks vary wildly. Some believe the dancing was a response to stress, a mass psychogenic illness triggered by fear and famine. Others think it was ritualistic, a desperate attempt to appease saints or fend off plague. A few even suggest it was a kind of spiritual rebellion, a moment where common folk defied the rigid rules of church and crown through sheer movement. One fringe tale tells of a town where dancers claimed to have been summoned by the ghost of a jester who died of laughter. That town now holds an annual dance festival in his name. No one's died dancing yet, but the mayor still keeps smelling salts on hand just in case. Back in the square, things are winding down. A few stragglers hum to themselves, swaying in place. A group of older women sits nearby, comparing blisters. You overhear one say she hasn't danced like that since the last time the river turned red, whatever that means. You stand, legs wobbling, and drift away into the night. What began as madness now feels sacred. And as the church bell tolls in the distance and the last dancer collapses into an exhausted sprawl, you realize that in medieval times, fun wasn't always funny. Sometimes it was desperate. Sometimes it was divine. And sometimes it was both. You awake the next morning on a hay pile with straw in your hair, sore legs, and a vague memory of dancing next to a goose. There's a dull ache behind your eyes that feels suspiciously like joy and regret having a tug of war. But there's no time to dwell. Word spreads fast in a medieval town, and today's hot event has everyone buzzing. An animal is on trial. You blink. Surely, this is metaphorical. Nope. A real pig is about to face real charges. Manslaughter, to be specific. You shuffle groggily with the crowd to the town's courthouse, which is really just the back of the miller's barn. There, in the makeshift dock, sits the accused, a plump sow tied to a post, seemingly unbothered by the fact that she's about to be judged by her peers. You take a seat on a squeaky bench. A man next to you hands you a pickle and whispers, "I heard she ate a baby." You drop the pickle. It sounds insane now, but in the Middle Ages, animal trials weren't even that rare. Pigs, cows, goats, even insects. If they committed a crime, or were accused of one, they could be dragged into court. Full proceedings followed. Legal counsel was assigned. Clergy might attend. There were actual verdicts, and yes, sentences. Historians still argue whether these trials were symbolic warnings to villagers or genuine expressions of belief that animals had moral agency. Some scholars think it was just a legal reflex gone haywire. If something caused harm, someone had to answer for it. You squint at the pig. She looks pretty smug. The town bailiff reads the charges aloud. This swine did, upon the morning of the feast of Saint Apollonia, enter the dwelling of John the Cooper, and grievously maul his infant son. The crowd gasps. The pig snorts. The judge sighs and rubs his temples. Then, remarkably, the pig's lawyer steps forward. A monk, with a crooked halo of hair, and a scroll longer than your arm. He clears his throat and begins a defense more passionate than anything you've heard outside a tavern love confession. He argues that the pig was merely acting on instinct, that her environment led to confusion, and that blame should fall on the negligent parents who allowed a pig indoors unsupervised. A woman in the crowd yells, "A fair point." The judge bangs a ladle on the table. It gets weirder. Witnesses are called: John the Cooper, crying, the midwife, smirking, and a sheep who was apparently in the room, silent. The bailiff attempts to translate for the sheep. It doesn't go well. You start wondering if this is some sort of elaborate village prank, but everyone is taking it very seriously. One fringe record from Savoy even tells of a group of rats being summoned to court for crop theft. The court sent a messenger who had to read their summons aloud in a field. When the rats didn't show up, shocking I know, their lawyer claimed the roads were too dangerous. The trial was delayed twice. In today's case, the verdict comes swiftly. The pig is found guilty. The sentence? Execution by hanging. You expect outrage. Instead, there's a quiet murmur of agreement. Some cross themselves. Others nod solemnly. This isn't just punishment. It's ritual. a community performance of justice, a moment where humans briefly assert control over the chaos of the natural world. You watch, stunned, as the pig is gently led away. She doesn't fight. Perhaps she doesn't know. Or perhaps she knows too much. Afterward, there's a small gathering by the stocks. Ale is passed around. A man jokes that his neighbor's donkey gave him the side eye yesterday. Might bring charges. Laughter erupts. There's even a game where townsfolk act out pretend trials for silly offenses. A hen accused of gossip. A goose who stole someone's shoe. They tie sticks to their heads to resemble horns and cluck dramatically. You get roped into playing a juror. Your job? Decide whether the rooster meant it when he crowed at 3 a.m. You vote yes, mostly because you didn't sleep. But beneath the jokes, you feel it. That strange undercurrent of fear and order. In a world where plague can strike at random, wolves can snatch children, and your next meal is never guaranteed, assigning blame, even to an animal, gives a sense of control. Medieval minds were steeped in symbolism. Animals weren't just animals. They represented temptation, chaos, sometimes even sin. Putting them on trial wasn't about justice. It was about narrative, a way to shape meaning in a disordered world. And maybe, just maybe, it was something else too. A weird collective form of coping, a blend of theater, law, and therapy, where the entire village played a part. The sun starts to dip. The trial is over. You stretch your sore limbs and wonder what you'll tell your friends if they ever ask, "What did you do today?" Judged a pig. Probably won't cut it. And yet, as the crowd drifts away and the scent of barley and barn dust hangs in the air, you can't help but feel a little grateful. Because in this strange, mud-soaked world, where justice wears a jester's hat and pigs take the stand, you, somehow, fit right in. You wander away from the courthouse with the surreal image of a condemned pig still lingering in your mind. The road ahead winds past shuttered shops and flickering lanterns until you hear the unmistakable sound of a hammer striking wood and people whispering, gasping, even weeping. You follow it instinctively. Up ahead, a temporary wooden stage has been erected outside the church, lit by thick candles and glowing embers. Men dressed in rough, homespun tunics shuffle around behind a curtain, muttering lines. One wears a paper crown. Another carries a rope soaked in red dye. A third is being whipped loudly, even though you know the scene hasn't started yet. You've stumbled into a mystery play, a live dramatization of Bible stories, staged by the townsfolk. But this isn't your average Sunday school pageant. These plays are known for being graphic, visceral, and, according to the woman standing next to you, surprisingly good theater. Tonight's feature? The Passion of Christ. You find a place to stand, wedged between a blacksmith's apprentice and a nun peeling an apple with unnerving focus. Then the curtain rises, or rather, is yanked aside by a barefoot boy with a slingshot. Jesus enters, barefoot and bruised, clutching a wooden cross. The Roman soldiers, played by enthusiastic but under-rehearsed locals, shove him, spit at him, and mock him with chilling realism. One swings a leather strap with a little too much force. The crowd flinches, but no one intervenes. Because this is part of the experience. Mystery plays weren't just casual religious reminders. They were community spectacles, lavishly produced, emotionally charged, and meant to evoke awe and repentance. Everyone watched, everyone wept, everyone knew the ending. Historians still argue whether these performances were intended as spiritual inspiration or emotional manipulation. Maybe both. But the blood, the bruises, the tears, those were real. You squint. Is that actual blood? You lean closer. Yep. One of the actors playing a thief has a gash on his forehead, clearly not part of the script. A whispered rumor passes through the crowd. He insisted on being authentic. You glance at the nun. She nods grimly, still slicing her apple. At one point, a boy portraying Judas actually vomits from the intensity of his own dramatic monologue. The audience applauds. There's something hypnotic about the way the actors blend into their roles, how the line between story and reality evaporates. Jesus falls, face down in the mud, and the crowd audibly gasps. A soldier drags him to his feet. A woman wails from the audience. It's unclear if she's acting or just feeling. One fringe tale tells of a town where the actor playing Jesus got so into character, he insisted on being nailed to the cross just a little. He ended up with 3 broken fingers and was considered a local saint afterward. The bishop reportedly called it committed but unwise. Back on stage, the crucifixion begins slowly, loudly. The sound of hammers striking wood echoes like thunder. You see Jesus wince, not performatively, but actually. You feel it in your teeth. The crown of thorns, not plastic. The nails, maybe blunted, but not fake. You shift your weight uncomfortably, realizing this was never meant to be just a show. Someone behind you whispers, "That's Martin the shoemaker. He plays Jesus every year, says the bruises help him feel closer to God." You wonder what it's like to hurt yourself in service of a story. But then again, you've seen people wrestle pigs, punch each other for turnips, and dance themselves into collapse. Maybe suffering is the medieval genre of fun. Then comes the resurrection scene. It's awkward. Jesus stumbles out from behind the curtain, now smiling, with slightly smudged face paint and a daisy crown someone must have thought looked heavenly. The mood lifts, a few children clap, someone coughs loudly. The tone shift is jarring, but no one seems to mind. Because the lesson's been absorbed, the story told, the tears shed, and strangely, there's a kind of catharsis in that. You notice now that many of the actors are crying. Whether from pain, relief, or exhaustion is unclear. The soldier who swung too hard earlier now hugs Jesus tightly. The crowd disperses slowly, somber, murmuring prayers. You linger. Mystery plays often ended in emotional silence. No bows, no curtain call, just a slow fade into the cold evening and a long walk home with thoughts trailing behind like smoke. You glance up. The stars are clearer now, unbothered by what just unfolded below. And as you turn to leave, a girl passing by mutters, "They say the devil's play is next week." You raise an eyebrow. She just nods. Apparently, that one has real fire. You walk through the chill night air, mind still reeling from the image of Jesus in muddy robes and daisy crown, when a loud clang startles you. A wooden gate swings open to your left. A man in a wolf mask waves you in. Time for the fool's court. He grins, then vanishes into the shadows. Naturally, you follow, because in medieval times, when someone in a wolf mask tells you something entertaining is about to happen, odds are it's weird, possibly illegal, and somehow still endorsed by the church. You step into a smoky courtyard, filled with torchlight and echoing with off-key singing. At the center, a rickety throne made of ale barrels and goose feathers. On it sits a man wearing three hats stacked on top of each other and holding a ladle like a scepter. The crowd shouts, "All hail the King of Fools!" Welcome to the Feast of Fools, where everything you thought you understood about power, propriety, and pants is turned on its head. This celebration, often held around the new year, was a wild, rollicking festival where roles were reversed, rules were broken, and chaos was mandatory. Priests dressed as animals, monks wore lipstick, pigs were marched through cathedrals in bishops' robes. Nothing was sacred, everything was ridiculous. Historians still argue whether this was tolerated blasphemy, a church-approved pressure valve, or a deeply misunderstood expression of theological satire. All you know is, someone just challenged a chicken to a duel. The new king belches loudly and declares that taxes will now be paid in onions and kisses. A cheer erupts. You find yourself kissed on the cheek by a woman wearing chainmail and a daffodil crown. You don't object. Then the court proceedings begin. Someone is dragged before the king, accused of being too sober. He's sentenced to drink from the chamber pot chalice, mercifully filled with ale. Another man is convicted of excessive seriousness and forced to tell a joke while being tickled by a feather duster. A boy is put on trial for possessing the hair of a goat. He's bald. The punishments are silly but theatrical. Sing a lullaby backward, crawl like a beetle, compose an ode to a spoiled turnip. Everyone's laughing, and for a moment, you are too. But beneath the silliness is something stranger. This is a ritualized inversion, a world flipped upside down so it can return right side up later. For just one night, the peasant is king. The priest is mocked. The serious are sentenced to silliness. In some towns, even bishops participated. The boy bishop tradition saw a choir boy dressed in full episcopal robes, delivering mock sermons and blessing the congregation with exaggerated hand gestures. One fringe account mentions a donkey being led into a cathedral, while the congregation brayed in unison to honor it. It's unclear if anyone objected. The king stands now, swaying slightly, and begins a solemn speech. Tonight, he declares, we remind the world that wisdom often wears the mask of foolishness, and folly the crown of truth. Everyone claps. Then he slips off the throne and lands face first in a pie. More clapping. You're handed a scroll declaring you official nighttime fool of the left corner of the east table. It comes with a pin made of straw and a small cheese. You accept with full dignity. The laughter swells and breaks like waves, then softens again. Someone plays a harp poorly. Another juggles eggs. A third reads poetry aloud. Terrible, beautiful nonsense about a love affair between a millstone and a duck. And yet, somehow, it feels meaningful. You start to understand that the Feast of Fools was never just a joke. It was an acknowledgement that life, under the crushing weight of war, famine, plague, and religious dread, needed release. A night to mock the very things that usually ruled your existence. Because to survive in the Middle Ages, sometimes you had to laugh at power. You had to turn the whole world upside down just to remember what the right side looked like. You sit on a barrel, sipping warm cider from a wooden cup shaped like a pig's head. The stars are high above, twinkling like they're in on the joke. Someone beside you starts singing a song about bees that sounds suspiciously like a love ballad. You hum along. The king snores loudly in his barrel throne. A chicken perches on his shoulder like a loyal squire. And you, strangely at peace, realize the real wisdom of the evening. Sometimes, the fool knows more than anyone, especially when he's got three hats and nothing left to lose. By now, you've grown oddly accustomed to the surreal rhythm of medieval life. You've danced with ghosts, judged a pig, watched a man nearly nail himself to a cross for dramatic effect, and been knighted with a slice of cheese. So when a child with soot on her cheeks tugs your sleeve and whispers, "Come see the talking corpse," you barely flinch. Of course, you follow. She leads you through a crooked alley lit by candles jammed into turnips. You pass a row of silent townsfolk queued outside a low building that smells faintly of incense and something you'd rather not identify. Inside, it's dark. Thick tapestries hang from the walls, muffling all sound except the quiet shuffling of feet. At the center of the room lies a wooden bier, and on it, a figure wrapped in pale linen, barely illuminated by the flickering torchlight. His face is uncovered, gray, serene. You realize you're at a memento mori exhibition, a medieval death-watching ritual meant to remind you, quite literally, that you too will die. You sidle into a space near the back, whispering thanks as someone hands you a sprig of rosemary for remembrance. Everyone stares silently at the dead man. It's not fear or sadness that fills the room. It's reverence and a strangely communal calm. Then the priest speaks. He has passed through the veil, he intones, but his mouth shall speak. Suddenly, a second man, dressed identically, emerges behind the corpse and begins to ventriloquize for it. In a soft, gravelly voice, the corpse now addresses the crowd. I once danced at feasts, drank from golden cups, and chased the butcher's daughter through the rye. And now I sleep, worm-bitten and forgotten. Everyone leans in then. The dead man talks for 15 minutes straight about vanity, pride, misplaced ambition. And that time he dropped his pants in front of a bishop by accident. The crowd laughs gently, then falls silent again. You're not sure what emotion to feel. It's bizarre, yes, but also unsettlingly beautiful. You can sense the weird comfort medieval people drew from these rituals. In a world where death lurked behind every fever, every blister, every bit of undercooked meat, they didn't hide from it. They invited it in, dressed it up, gave it a voice. Historians still argue whether these death plays were moral theater, passive-aggressive estate planning, or simply deeply ingrained spiritual habits. One fringe story tells of a widow who hosted weekly dinners with her embalmed husband and demanded guests make polite conversation. She apparently threw out anyone who mentioned the smell. A slow procession begins. Each visitor places a token beside the body: coins, flowers, tiny carved trinkets. The child who brought you here puts down a pebble shaped like a heart. You place your cheese pin from the Feast of Fools unsure if this is appropriate or wildly offensive. The ventriloquist begins a final refrain, one clearly rehearsed. Laugh well, sleep soundly, and remember me in every gulp of air, for I am your future and your echo. With that, the candlelight dims. Silence falls again. The audience bows slightly, not out of grief, but gratitude. Outside, the night feels even colder. You inhale deeply, suddenly aware of how alive your lungs are. Someone near you mutters, "Makes you think, doesn't it?" You nod, unsure whether they're talking about mortality or the voice work. These kinds of rituals, sometimes called death entertainments or ars moriendi performances, weren't always so formal. In some towns, people held wake games where you had to sit next to a corpse and tell a joke. Others organized living funerals, where someone not yet dead gave their own eulogy and accepted gifts. Because why wait? Tonight, that line between death and performance has blurred completely. What you witnessed wasn't just a show. It was therapy, philosophy, and a reminder wrapped in one. You pass a baker setting up for the next day. He offers you a warm roll, then jokes, "Eat while you can. The worms don't share." You laugh, and not nervously. You get it now. For medieval people, fun wasn't always joyful. Sometimes it was defiant. A laugh in the face of doom. A pig trial after a plague. A talking corpse that tells you to treasure your breath. You eat the roll slowly, savoring each bite like it's your last. Because one day, it will be. But not tonight. Tonight, you walk back into the strange, candlelit dark, hand warmed by pastry and heart strangely full. You've now witnessed a dead man deliver a monologue, which seems like a reasonable high point to call it a night. But as you make your way toward the outskirts of the village, past the whispering willows and snoring cattle, you hear it. That unmistakable noise, a collective gasp, followed by clapping, hooting, and the unmistakable whinny of a very confused horse. You're being pulled again, this time toward an open field, ringed with torches and laughter. There, gathered under the stars, is a crowd watching something equal parts athletic competition and existential comedy. Welcome to the trial by ordeal reenactment, or, more accurately, its strange evolution into a local party trick. What once was a grim form of divine judgment has become something the villagers now treat as entertainment, a festival within a festival where folks volunteer, yes, volunteer, to replicate the old ways of proving innocence, walking across hot plowshares, retrieving a ring from boiling water, or balancing on a log while reciting psalms backward. Tonight's lineup includes Simon the Smith's Fiery Foot Trot and Marjorie's Trial by Bread. You blink. You'd heard of trial by bread, but you thought that was just indigestion. Turns out, it's real. Marjorie steps forward, rosy-cheeked, barefoot, and grinning like a schoolgirl, holding a chunk of rye the size of your fist. She takes a bite, chews slowly, then begins to choke dramatically. Everyone roars with laughter. Apparently, if you can't swallow the bread, you're guilty. But Marjorie winks, downs a gulp of ale, and proclaims, "Innocent, mostly." Trial by ordeal was once no joke. It was deadly serious. The accused were subjected to torturous tests, carrying hot iron, surviving underwater dunking, or retrieving stones from flames. The belief was that God would intervene and protect the innocent. Unsurprisingly, people often just didn't survive. Historians still argue whether these trials were more ritual than real, or if they were manipulated by local officials to deliver the right verdict. A fringe tale tells of a man who passed a firewalking test, then got arrested anyway for looking too smug. But here, tonight, everything's softened. It's a parody, sure, but one rooted in living memory. Some participants dress up in robes. Others act like courtroom jesters. A few get very into it, performing dramatic speeches before dipping their hands into warm stew and pretending to scream in agony. You get handed a roll, witness for the ordeal of feathers. Before you can ask what that means, a man is rolled out in a barrel covered in goose down, then asked to hop across a marked circle while confessing his sins. He mostly confesses to stealing pie crusts. The audience gives him a score of 7 out of 10. The feather dance needs work. These antics might seem absurd, but there's an edge to them. Everyone's laughing, but they're also remembering. This is history in drag, a satirical echo of the terror people once felt, now worn down into something palatable, something that can be laughed at without losing its sting. The high point of the night is the duel of disputes. Two village elders, each holding a fish, argue over whose neighbor's cow ruined their garden back in 1307. The only rule? Each insult must rhyme. It's petty. It's masterful. You've never seen two people wield fish with such lyrical venom. Finally, they're declared both guilty and sentenced to drink from the same mug until they stop fighting. This takes longer than you'd expect. The night winds down with one final ordeal: the test of the toad. A wooden box is placed on a stool. Inside, you're told, is a very real, very angry toad. The volunteer must place their hand inside and retrieve a coin without screaming. The baker's assistant accepts the challenge. She reaches in slowly, dramatically, then screams, not from fear, but from laughter. She pulls out the coin and a tiny stuffed toad with a crown. It's ridiculous and absolutely perfect. You realize these people have taken one of the darkest tools of medieval justice and made it their own. They've turned fear into festivity, cruelty into comedy, superstition into satire. And in doing so, they've done what medieval folks were masters of: survival by absurdity. Because if you're going to face divine judgment anyway, why not turn it into a party? The crowd begins to disperse. Lanterns are snuffed. Someone strums a lute with 2 broken strings. The horse you heard earlier is eating an unattended meat pie. You wander back toward town, past the last flickers of flame, smiling to yourself. In this strange little pocket of the past, you've learned the true power of human creativity: to take the terrifying, the painful, even the stupid, and turn it into joy. A joy you'll carry with you, along with a tiny stuffed toad someone slipped into your pocket. It's deep into the night now. Stars dust the sky like powdered sugar over burnt porridge, and the village is finally quiet, or so you think. Then you hear the faint sound of chanting, low, rhythmic, just at the edge of hearing, like wind murmuring secrets through pine needles. You follow it, of course, because after everything, dancing plagues, pig trials, fool kings. You've learned that medieval quiet usually means something weird is about to happen. You find them in the woods, gathered around a stone circle lit by glowing coals and smoky lanterns. A group of hooded figures moves slowly, deliberately, their hands raised, eyes half closed in ecstatic concentration. It's not a cult, probably. You've stumbled upon a caraverie, a midnight ritual of public shaming disguised as chaotic fun. Charivaries were loud, unruly, and deeply symbolic. Technically, they were meant to shame rule breakers, a widow who remarried too soon, a husband too dominated by his wife, or even just someone unpopular. The village would gather to serenade the offenders with banging pots, off-key music, sarcastic songs, and often very pointed skits. But here, in this version, it's become something else. Part theater, part group therapy, part spooky community roast. Tonight's honoree? The blacksmith, who apparently tried to court four sisters at once and got caught when he sent the same love song to all of them. A reenactment is already underway. Four villagers, in straw wigs, chasing a man in an oversized tunic while shouting in falsetto. You suppress a laugh. So does the blacksmith, who's tied to a chair, sipping mead from a horn and looking like he's both ashamed and extremely flattered. The crowd bangs pots and pans, blows cow horns, and smacks wooden spoons against buckets. It's a racket. Birds fly from trees. A dog howls in distant protest. And yet, nobody's angry. Because, as with so many medieval traditions, the mockery is medicinal. This is about resetting social order, humiliating just enough to reintegrate someone without exile. A kind of moral pressure washing with jokes and noise. Historians still argue whether Caravarus were genuinely community-led justice or just excuses to bully people. A fringe record tells of a village that held an annual Caravari for no reason, just choosing someone at random and demanding they atone for being suspiciously average. They threw cheese at him. He wept, they cheered, and then everyone danced. You get handed a spoon and told to join the judgment. So you do. You smack the spoon rhythmically on a helmet someone's wearing as a drum. A child tosses herbs into the air like confetti. Someone else yells, "Don't trust men who sing in minor keys." You're not sure why, but it feels profound. Suddenly, a new twist. The blacksmith is given a choice. He must either sing a love ballad to a turnip or promise to bake pies for every woman he tried to court. He chooses the turnip. The turnip is held aloft. The song is emotional. You wipe away a tear. After the laughter fades and the last pot is banged, a solemn hush falls over the group. An elder steps forward and blesses the circle, not religiously, but with a kind of humble poetry. We gather in mockery, not to wound, but to remember. We jest not to punish, but to mend. And in laughter, we return to each other. It's unexpectedly beautiful. Even the turnip looks moved. You stay a bit longer, helping to gather the scattered buckets and walk a sleepy toddler back to her cottage. The blacksmith thanks you for not throwing anything harder than bread. He promises to write more original songs. And then, as the group slowly drifts home, torches flickering, the woods breathing softly again, you realize This was the last of the night's strange delights. No more dancing plagues, no more monkey jousts or corpse monologues. Just the slow, gentle return to silence. You sit for a moment on a mossy stone, let the cool air settle on your cheeks, and listen to the hush, to the echoes, to the end of a day unlike any you've ever lived. And as your eyelids begin to drift, your mind spirals through everything you've seen, wild, weird, and wonderful. And you realize something else, too. In the medieval world, fun wasn't always found in games or parties. Sometimes it was buried inside rituals, hidden in shame, smuggled into hardship. A cracked smile during a plague, a joke in the stocks, a fool's crown on a bishop's head. It wasn't just fun, it was resilience, and it got them through. Just like maybe it's getting you through now. And now the village sleeps. The laughter has faded, the fires have gone out, and even the fools, crowned, feathered, ridiculous, have curled up in quiet corners to dream of jesters' courts and dancing pigs. You lie back in the tall grass just beyond the edge of town, the damp earth cool against your skin, the stars vast and endless above you. The wind is soft now, not singing, but sighing, like the world itself has exhaled. Your legs still ache from dancing. Your hands smell faintly of wood smoke and rosemary, but your heart, strangely, feels full. Tonight, you've wandered through the strangest corridors of medieval fun, those dark, dusty hallways where people found laughter in pain, meaning in madness, and community in chaos. You've seen what it meant to joke your way through fear, to flip the world upside down just to remember which way is up. And maybe you didn't just survive this night. Maybe you understood it. You hear a donkey bray sleepily somewhere in the distance. A last candle flickers in a windowsill. A rooster, too early, makes a half-hearted attempt at greeting the dawn, then falls silent again. You pull your blanket around your shoulders, breathe deeply, and let it all drift. Let the pig trials go. Let the passion plays fade. Let the sound of pots and spoons echo once, then vanish. You are safe now, warm, still. And as your eyes finally close and your breath evens out, the world softens too, edges blurred, noise stilled, night complete. Sleep well, time traveler. Dream strange, dream deep. The past is quiet now, and you've earned your rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.